Hello, welcome to another edition of Chess Chat, a program designed to give you, the viewer, a deeper understanding and appreciation of the fascinating game of chess. I am your host, George Marigenian, Program Director for the Wachusett Chess Club, which meets every Wednesday evening in room C-199 of the McKay Campus School at Fitchburg State College. And with me, once again, is my trusty co-host, Martin Lane of Lunenburg, one of the strongest and most active chess players in central Massachusetts. Welcome, Marty.
Good evening, George.
Well, Marty, I thought today we would commemorate the 170th anniversary of the birth of the first great American chess player. His name was Paul Morphy, and he was a tragic figure in U.S. chess because actually he had a very short career. He was born in June 1837, and he died at the age of 47 in New Orleans. He was born in New Orleans and died in New Orleans in 1884. But what's tragic about Morphy, and he's also many times referred to as the pride and sorrow of chess, is that he showed that he was superior to all his contemporaries in this country in the late 1850s. But then he wanted to show that he was number one in the world by sailing to Europe in 1858 to take on the strongest players that Europe had to offer.
Now, were there tournaments at that time? I mean, how was chess played competitively?
There were tournaments, there were always matches, and there were actually international. London was actually the hotbed of tournaments in Europe. And the leading English player was a master by the name of Howard Staunton. He was a Shakespearean scholar, one of the most well-known Shakespearean scholars of his day, and also a chess columnist for one of the leading London newspapers. But Morphy went over in the attempt to take on Staunton in a match, head-to-head.
So there wasn't a formal world championship cycle, so you just went and challenged somebody who was considered the top player.
Exactly. The world championship, the official world championship, didn't take place until like 30 years later, when Wilhelm Steinitz became the first official world champion. But at that time in the 1850s, 60s, no one ever thought, for example, of having a world championship. It was actually challenged. Players would challenge others. So Morphy went over. He actually defeated some of the top players actually in Germany, France, and some of the lesser knowns actually in England. But his main objective was to take on Howard Staunton.
And did he ever get a chance to do that?
No. Staunton avoided him like the plague. He knew that actually if he played Morphy, that his reputation was on the line. He was not willing to take that risk by taking on this young American at the age of, he must have been like 20 years old, a top player in this country. So he stayed away from Morphy. I mean, they did meet. Yes, they were very cordial as far as having sessions together. And I think they did play a few consultation games where they took on a partner. But Staunton never faced Morphy head-to-head. So again, he's a very tragic figure in this country. And you know what? It's interesting. Before he went over to England, he had studied law at a very young age. I think he was like 19 or 20. Was studying at the University of Louisiana, actually was trained to be a lawyer. They say actually he knew most of his Louisiana civil code by heart, verbatim. He could quote actually basically all the passages, from the code.
But he never got much of a chance to practice law, is that right?
When he came back from Europe, disillusioned because he had not faced Staunton, he actually basically hung up his spurs. Or hung up his pawns, or whatever you want to call it, because actually his chess career was over. I think actually he did dabble it like in the 1860s. He visited Paris. He went back to Europe, played some casual games, offhand games, but it was all over for him. His chess career spanned probably 5 years at the most. He came back. He was serious about becoming a lawyer. And actually, but no one took him seriously. Here he is wanting to set up practice, in New Orleans. But of course, this was a tough time in this country. This is the Civil War. He's coming back to this country engaged, in a Civil War. So it was a tough time. And being a Southerner, you would think that he would actually show support for the Southern cause. Well, he didn't. He did express actually the support for the Southern cause. So that certainly did not meet well with his fellow citizens in Louisiana.
All right, now as a chess player, he had a reputation for being an attacking player.
Yes. Very tactical.
Tactical. And
Yes.
when he wasn't playing matches, what did top players do in between formal matches? Did they give exhibitions?
They would give exhibitions, but actually, yes, Morphy gave exhibitions blind. He would actually play blind. He could play blindfold. He could actually play. He loved to play games at odds.
At odds.
Handicap, where he would take off a piece. Maybe a rook or a knight or sometimes a pawn, depending on the strength of the player.
And was that more popular in those days than it is now? I don't hear too much about top players giving piece odds.
No.
They might give time odds in a speed game or something.
Nowadays, yes, time odds is actually the most popular. But back then, 150 years ago, giving material odds was very popular. And Morphy was actually very famous for playing games at odds.
Okay, so did you find a game where he...
Yes, I found a game that actually he played in New Orleans in 1858, before he went over to Europe, in which he played an amateur. We don't have the name of the player, but this is a game that actually is well known in chess circles, in which Morphy, playing white, removed his queen rook.
So he's just going to take this rook
took the
right
rook
off the board.
Right.
Okay, so it's not there anymore.
Right.
Okay.
And actually spotting against a stronger player, a rook,
Well, a rook is a major piece.
It's a major piece. But Morphy was so confident that he could remove his queen rook and actually still win the game.
Right.
So he removed it and opened the game with e4. So let's play actually his first move.
So his first move is pawn to e4.
Yes.
And we've seen this before. It occupies one of the central squares, attacks two others on the opponent's side. So it's a very strong centralizing move. It opens up a diagonal for the bishop and a diagonal for the queen. So it's a good opening move.
It's an excellent opening move. Right. Yeah. It's always good, actually, when starting the game, to put pawns in the center.
Right.
So this is highly desirable. What Black responded was, on his move, was with e5.
Right, good for
the same
reasons. Right.
For the same reason.
And it blocks any further progress by White's pawn.
Exactly,
So
it does.
It serves a couple of purposes.
All right, so this is all logical.
Okay.
All right, so it's Morphy's second move.
And Morphy plays, again, what many consider one of the best second moves for White. He plays his knight to f3. Now, what this does is it attacks two center squares, but it also attacks this pawn. It gets a knight out where it can be played, and it poses Black a problem. He has to do something to defend that pawn.
Okay, and that's what Black does. And there are different ways to defend that pawn, but Black chooses the best way, by developing a piece. If you can develop a piece and defend at the same time, that is preferable. So he played knight c6. The amateur played knight c6. The best reply, as far as Black is concerned.
Okay, now Morphy has a couple of possibilities. He can play extremely safe, but not very wisely. Playing pawn to d3 would close off this diagonal that was nice and open.
Right.
He could, I think we've seen this before, play the pawn out to d4.
That's possible.
And attack this pawn again, attacking the center. He could take this bishop and go all the way over to b5, and this attacks the knight, which is defending the center pawn. If he were with the idea of possibly exchanging those two pieces and then he could win a bishop, that would be one thing he could do. Instead, Morphy decides to play bishop to c4, now attacking a key f7 pawn on Black's side.
Which is Black's most vulnerable pawn.
It's defended only by the king.
So this is a very good diagonal to place the bishop on this a2 to g8 diagonal.
Right.
It's active placement of the bishop. Now going back to the move you mentioned before about the bishop going to b5, that actually was a move that actually was very popular with the Spanish players.
Right.
In fact,
known as a Spanish opening.
It's known as a Spanish opening. And actually in English-speaking countries, it's also known as the Ruy Lopez opening.
Right.
But bishop c4 is a move that was actually favored by the Italians. The Italians actually thought very highly of bishop c4. Okay, so it is now Black's move, and Black actually could do the same thing. Black actually in this position, Black actually only has two good moves. Is either to play bishop c5, which he didn't do, but there's nothing wrong with it,
right,
because it places the bishop here to attack White's weakest pawn on f2. What Black played was knight f6. So that was actually black's third move, knight f6. Now that we have two knights out, this is known as the two knights defense.
Right.
How simple can you get? So now we have a development of a piece. We're attacking the pawn on e4. So this looks like a very good move, which it is. So it's Morphy's turn. His fourth move coming up.
Well, now we have to think that this is where it gets critical. Remember, Morphy has given up his queen's rook,
Yes.
and as the stronger player, he needs to mount an attack quickly. If he can't let the game go on too long, because this will become a serious factor in trying to hold the game. That's where the peace odds would really come in. So he has to find something aggressive. He has to defend his e4 pawn. It's attacked by the black knight. And he needs to find something that he can't really afford to play something as passive as this. It'll give black a chance to equalize.
Right.
So he plays a move knight to g5, which has a very peculiar name, and I hope you can explain it. We know that as the fried liver attack.
Not yet.
Not quite.
Not yet. We're going to reach what is known as the fried liver attack. But this move, knight g5, actually, we have a double threat now. We see now the knight and the bishop are trained. We have a double attack on this pawn on f7, and actually, what white is actually threatening either knight takes f7, forking the queen and the rook.
Winning his rook back,
Yes,
essentially.
or bishop takes f7, check,
Right.
forcing the king to move. Now, it's interesting, about 20 or 30 years later, there was a German master by the name of Tarrasch, Dr. Tarrasch. He was a medical doctor. Siegfried Tarrasch was his name. And when this move was shown to him, he laughed at this. He said, this is ridiculous. He called this in German ein Stümperzug. Ein Stümper is someone who's a bungler, a duffer. Anyone that play a move like this, moving the same piece twice in the opening, classical chess players didn't do that. You wouldn't waste time moving the same piece over and over again. But this certainly has merit because white has a double threat here. Now, black's move, black has only one move to stop this attack on this pawn, this f7 pawn, and the move that black played on his fourth move was d5, with an attack now on the bishop.
Right.
So it's Morphy's move. He has now this a bishop attack. There's also the pawn is attacked. There's a double attack on the pawn. There's a single attack on the bishop. So how is Morphy going to respond to this?
Morphy can't afford to move the bishop either to here or back here because he'll simply lose this pawn either to the knight or to the pawn.
Yes.
The only way he can proceed here is to essentially dissolve the threat by playing pawn on d5.
Okay. Now by taking e takes d5 on his fifth move, Morphy is now attacking this knight on c6. But it would seem on the surface of it that white can respond, which he did, with knight takes d5. We're going to find out that it was discovered years later that this is actually the mistake. But actually, it looks okay. You know, back then, 150 years ago, they didn't realize, the analysis had to be done to discover there's something better. The correct move, by the way, when this two knights opening the defense is played, is to play the knight to c6 to a5, attack the bishop. That's the correct move, which the chess theoreticians worked out, years later. But the amateur played knight takes d5. That was his fifth move. The queen is defending the knight, which is attacked by the bishop, and the queen now is attacking the knight, which is unprotected. So now it's Morphy's move. Well, looks okay for black. However,
Morphy wants to continue that attack. He's got to find a way to keep up that momentum. The Estonian Grandmaster Paul Carrez, when he was writing about this position, said it's been played for over 400 years. So there's been a lot of analysis devoted to it. And as you say, the modern analysts now realize that knight to a5 is the correct move.
Right.
But there are players who still play knight take pawn on f7.
Aha. Now we are coming in with knight takes f7, forking the queen and the rook.
Right.
And I thought actually, see, this bishop actually is shut off from defending this knight. But black doesn't have much of a choice. Otherwise, he's going to lose his
one
rook.
or the other.
He's got to save his queen. So this is now what is known as the fried liver attack.
This is where it becomes fried liver.
Because black responds with king takes f7. And this fried liver attack, as you say, it goes back more than 400 years. It was the Italians. The Italians who were very dominant in chess back in the 16th century. They came up with this, and they called it the Fegatello attack. Fegatello is an Italian word which means actually liver. It's actually a slice of liver. Not any old liver, it's pork liver. Because actually, if it were chicken liver, it would be fegatino. But fegatello, in fact, there's an Italian dish. I've never had it. I don't think I would ever would. It's called fegatelli, which is actually slices of fried pork liver. Not appetizing to me, but fegatello is what the Italians... You know, and people used to ask, well, why would the Italians back then, 400 years ago, call this the fegatello? Actually, this may imply that this night sacrifice, offering this night, is actually is used as liver. The liver is like bait to lure black into a trap.
All right.
So one can only surmise that's why it was called the fegatello, or the fried liver attack in English.
All right. So now that he was forced to take with the king, we can see the bishop now pins the knight.
All right.
And white has the opportunity to check the king and simultaneously attack this knight.
And recover, threaten to recover his knight.
Right.
He's already made black forfeit castling.
Right.
He's won a pawn in the process, and now white is threatening to regain his piece with a better position.
Right.
So black actually is not willing to give that piece back so readily, and plays on his move, seventh move.
Right.
He comes up, king e6, defending the knight.
Right, and he also has to. He can't go back. He can't go to g8. He can't play the king from here. He can't go back to g8 because that simply mates.
Yes, it would check, and the only move he could block it. He could hold off mate for one move, but it would be mate.
Right.
Yes.
So he not only does he want to defend, but he has to. He can't
So he has
go
to
back.
defend.
He has to come up.
So the king is on e6. We have a double defense of this knight with the queen and the king.
Right.
So how does Morphy continue this attack?
Well, when you have an attack like this, you always look for ways to add on pressure. He plays knight to c3, adding another attacker to the knight on d5.
Okay, so that's Morphy's eighth move is knight c3. Now, yes, we have now a triple attack on this knight. Now, I can see how black actually can defend this knight again. Actually, there are two ways. One way is actually to play this knight back, this knight c on the c file, to e7, which of course blocks this bishop, but if actually the objective is to play c6 and reinforce the defense of this knight. If black ever succeeds in doing that, there's no way that white will ever get his piece back.
No. And we have to keep in mind, he's down a whole rook.
Yes, he's down a whole rook. Another way is to play this knight, the c knight, to b4, defending this knight, and also with the objective, also have, the main thing is actually to reinforce the defense of this knight with c6.
Right.
But what black played in the game it was an interesting alternative. He played knight d4. So that's what the amateur played, knight d4, attacking the queen.
So it makes a certain amount of sense. He comes out, he's going to attack the queen. He doesn't see any, from here, he doesn't see any immediate threat that, that white can mount.
Okay. But again, he made no preparations to defend this knight. So he's actually relinquishing his piece.
Right.
Okay. So Morphy continues how?
Now he takes.
Bishop takes d5. His ninth move. Check. Bishop takes d5. So now the king has to move. The queen certainly is not going to take the bishop. Yeah, because actually the knight will take it. All right. So what black played was king d6.
Right.
All right. Morphy's move.
And then he plays the queen down to f7.
Now, is there a threat? This is a very good move by Morphy, because is he not threatening mate in one move?
In one move, he can play knight to e4, check, and mate.
Because the king is deprived of going to c5, cannot go here. All these squares are covered by white. So that is the main threat, so is the checkmate, knight e4. All right, so what black does, he has to stop that threat. What he does on his 10th move, he plays bishop e6. All right, so
now Morphy exchanges bishops.
All right, bishop takes e6. That was his 11th move. And now black recaptured with his knight. Knight takes e6. Now, black gave back the piece, but remember, he's still a rook ahead. and it looks like he's surviving here.
Well, Morphy is going to continue to try to push the king out into the open. He plays knight to e4, check.
Okay.
King can't go back. There's no blocking. He has to go.
He can't
come
go to
out
c5.
somehow. Right.
The knight controls that
So
square.
he only has 2 squares to go
He
to.
can't go here to c6 because he will lose the knight to the queen.
Right.
So Lee has one move.
Right.
This move forces Black now to play on his 12th move, king d5.
Right.
Okay.
And
He's attacking that, by the way.
And Morphy is going to continue to lure him out. He's going to play c4,
Aha.
check.
So he attacks the king, and now Black has no choice. He can't come back because the knight controls the d6 square. He can't go to any of these. If he moves this square, we'll lose the knight. So he has no choice other than to take the knight. So he takes king takes e4.
Right.
That's actually the amateur's 13th move. It's Morphy's move.
Morphy's 14th move, I guess this is his queen. He takes the knight on e6.
So queen takes e6. All right. Now, it is the amateur's move, and materially, he is still that one rook ahead.
He's still that original rook ahead.
And how are we with
But
pawns?
the king is way out in the middle of
That's
the board.
true. This is not a good place to have a king.
He's on the wrong side of the board.
All right. So, and of course, the amateur would like to get this rook into play. But the rook cannot get into play unless we at least vacate, like this square, get the queen out.
Right, to
so
help
that we
the
can
king,
actually
if
place a
nothing
rook
else.
on the file.
Yeah, right.
So what the amateur did on his 14th move, he played queen d4. Comes here, protects. He actually has... well, actually, he's not doing anything. He's not attacking this because this is defending.
No, but he's getting ready to move
the
that
idea
rook
is,
over.
his plan is to bring the rook
Right.
over, you know,
Right.
and eventually get this out, and then the rooks
Right.
will be
If he
connected.
can hold this, then he wins because
Okay.
he's got that rook advantage. So Morphy plays another check. He plays queen to g4, check.
Ooh, this looks not too good for Black.
Now he's only got one space he can go to.
Yes, because he can't go back here because the pawn
pawn.
controls this d5 square.
And he can't go here.
Can't go to any of these squares here. The only square he has to play king d3. The
Right.
only move the Black has. King
So-
d3 on his 15th move.
Morphy's going to continue to push the king around. He's going to come to queen to e2, check.
Okay, check. Now, what does that force Black to do?
He's only got one square.
There's only one square he can go to. And the only square that is open to him, that he must play, is king c2.
Right.
So king c2. All right, so it's Morphy's move.
Morphy has yet another check, d3, check.
And this is a discovered check.
Right.
The pawn move, but the pawn is not doing the
Then
checking.
checking.
It's the queen, which was uncovered, which is actually checking the king. Well, actually, Black doesn't have too many choices. And what he did in the game, actually, he probably shortened his misery, his torture, and he actually captured the bishops. So what the amateur did was play king takes c1. So now he's another piece ahead.
He's another
now
piece
he's
ahead.
2 pieces ahead.
But
the game is coming to an
right.
end.
Morphy has the final move, castle, checkmate.
Which is very pretty, because this actually, he's castling on the 18th move. Now, usually, is it usually...
And he's checkmated on his
Yeah, he's actually checkmated.
on the white's back. Right.
Right, exactly. On the back rank here, this pawn is protected by the queen, so the king cannot move. The game is over. It's checkmate.
All right.
You know, it's rather interesting that Morphy, you know, look how he delayed castling. I mean, to conduct this attack.
Sure.
Now, as a rule, is it good actually to castle early in the game?
That's considered a rule of thumb. It is considered better to castle early. It gets your king into safety, a little away from the center of the board. We see what happens if the king gets caught in the center of the board
Right.
and pushed out. This gets the king to safety. It also develops the rook more towards the center, where it has more effect,
Yes.
and so on. So it is considered a good idea to castle early.
Okay, so what do we learn from this game as far as this fried liver attack? And by the way, I certainly would recommend that I would recommend, with my mic going off, that any serious chess player will actually learn how to play the Fegatello attack or the fried liver attack, and also how to know how to play against it. Because anyone who plays the two knights defense, and can we just briefly go back to the two knights defense? Just go back.
Sure.
And let's put the rook back on the board.
On the board, okay.
Because actually, if you have a full contingent of pieces, you want to play with the all the pieces. And the two knights defense is actually, I think, favored by master players. When given a choice between playing, so we play e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. Again, bishop c5 is known as the Italian game, or also in English-speaking countries as the gioco piano. Gioco being the Italian word for game, piano, you as a musician know it means quiet, soft,
softly.
easy. So it's an easy, soft game. But this is the Italian game, but this is the two knights game, knight f6, okay? And then we saw actually Morphy playing knight g5, which is now moving the same piece twice in the opening,
Right.
which actually Tarash criticized. He couldn't believe it. When he was shown this position, he said, I would never play this. In fact, in the books he has written, he says he would recommend no one ever play this. But of course, this is a good move. This is considered the classical variation against the two knights defense. So what we saw happen was that actually to stop this double threat attack on this pawn, black played d5, which is correct.
Okay.
And now Morphy played e takes d5.
Okay.
Okay.
And this is where you say that there was a better move.
Well, yeah, this is the move to play. Right, knight a5 is the correct move. But I want to show you something which is interesting. Let us say, for example, we continue with the game that the amateur played. He played knight takes d5, right?
Right.
Okay, let's do the fried liver attack.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, that's all forced now. He must take. King takes f7. We see that. He comes here, double attack on this, so
Right.
the king comes up to e6, protects the knight with the queen. Okay, now we pour the pressure on.
Right.
Okay, now, what are we going to do now? Do we do what the amateur did, or do we play this move? Now if we play this move, we have a double. We have a
We're
threat here.
turning check and winning the rook.
But you know what? I mean, this is actually going into very deep analysis.
Right.
But actually, the move that people played here, we can either play queen here,
Right.
e4, protecting this, or believe it or not, we can actually play
this.
a3, allowing
go
this.
ahead.
Yeah, right.
And this would actually bring us almost back to
Right.
the game.
If we do that, the king comes over to d1, attacks the knight.
Right.
The knight takes a1.
Right.
Now, white is free now to take this knight on d5 with the bishop.
Right. With check.
So bishop takes d5 check, and now let's move the king, for example. Well, let's move it actually to this square. We'll move here.
Okay.
Now, can white win this game by force in two moves? He can. It's a forced
Well,
checkmate.
it's the same one we looked at.
Yes, it is.
Queen to f7 check.
Check. He only has
He
one
only
square.
has one square.
King d6 is the
And
move.
knight to e4.
And checkmate.
So there's a checkmate. To
And
say.
this, by the way, is a very well-known trap in the two knights defense.
Well, that's a good way to end this program. We have to wrap it up.
I think we do have to wrap this program up. I would like to actually point out, Martin, that actually we have a special event coming to Fitchburg on Saturday, June 23rd at Fitchburg State College. The Wachusett Chess Club, which meets at the college on Wednesday nights, is going to be sponsoring an inter-club match with clubs from Western Massachusetts. We're going to have the Pioneer Valley Chess Club from Northampton, the Kingsman Chess Club from Athol, possibly the Springfield Chess Club, the Greater Worcester Chess Club. So we're hosting this inter-club match, of which we are the champions.
Yeah, that's why we're hosting it.
We're hosting.
We're the defending champions.
We're the defending
right.
champions.
Okay.
We won the event last year, and again, we actually welcome anyone out there who wants to come and be a spectator.
Now, will that be held at the McKay campus?
That will
School?
be held in room C199 of the McKay Campus School. It'll start in the morning around 9 o'clock, and people can come anytime.
And that's Saturday, June
23rd. So
Okay.
I would certainly recommend that any of you viewers come by the McKay Campus School on Saturday, June 23rd, and take us in. Take in chess, which is captivating. It's fascinated Martin and me for decades, and I think it'll do the same thing to you. So until next time, we'll see you on Chess Chat.